Dude, I wanted you to explain to everyone I met you. About a year ago, I found you through the internet.
In other words, you got to know a part of me just like I did too. So it's a pleasure for us to be able to share this part today here. Right. Dude. It's interesting because it's a piece of the person, right?
So that's a funny thing because when there was expo music, I would go there and people would stop to talk to me because of my music or because of the lessons I posted. Today I went to the Sao Paulo Fair and basically everyone stopped me way more because of the podcast. And I was surprised. Right. I was like, wow, there are people here who might have never heard my music. You took a bit of a somewhat different path in a way. You started in radio and TV. So, dude, who exactly is Daniel for beginners?
Yeah. Now, that's really crazy, right? Because this trajectory of having started working professionally in radio and television, it even gives the impression that who is this host? So you want to get into music? It's the opposite. Since I was a little kid, always, we went through that whole process of the little rock and roll kid from the countryside who wants to understand what a guitar is. I thought the guitar plugged into the wall when I was a kid. There was this innocence, but what I want to say is this. I went to Sao Paulo to get into music. Since the way to support myself back then was by working in those media outlets, I took advantage of that to be close to those I admired. So, working at 89 FM and Brazil 2000 right after that, before El Dorado, which were rock radio stations, man, I remember the first guy I interviewed was Glenn Hughes, that bassist from Deep Purple, right? One of the Brazilian bands, I remember that. This is the first one I interviewed. Now, the first one I actually got to touch like this, the story is funny. I was there at the radio station and Rick Wakeman from Yes showed up with his son, who is now on the tour for You Sábado. He was a 17-year-old boy. I said, wow, it's Rick Wakeman. I even got an autograph. The elevator at the radio station broke. Back then, it was on the 17th floor. And we went down 17 floors racing each other. I said, man, I came to Sao Paulo to racing with Rick Wakeman. I've always had that. I met the Young Brothers, right? From AC/DC. So working in radio, especially in this segment that I've always been passionate about, it was great for me to get to know not just the musicians, but the market. I answered the phone as an intern, and I immediately understood that the most requested song wasn't the one the listener had in mind. You know that, right? It was already determined. Yeah. Talk about that, man. Oh, of course, right, man.
Because sometimes people don't know about that time of Kaaba and everything.
Yeah, there's a whole story, right? Man, well, there are several things about that payola. The Jabba in the United States started in the 50s. That's not it. I could be wrong. The payola, that is, paying to play on the turntable. Who was receiving that money in the 50s and 60s? It was the disc jockey. It was the DJ. It was the host. Disc jockey is that it's the guy who talks and operates. He would get the change there to play. So there's a world of dirt in that. And now, back when I worked in radio, I know that this money didn't go to the hosts, and even if I wanted it to, it wouldn't have.
But it was already getting there. Is it something you found out about, or has it always been obvious?
I noticed that when I answered the phone, we wrote everything down. I memorized all the area codes in Sao Paulo and the neighborhoods while answering the phone. When they called on the rotary phone still from the neighborhood, Nova Cachoeirinha, I knew what the area code was. So that was my way of mapping it out. I was getting to know the city, and I would answer. And at the end of the day, funny enough, in the 90s, the most requested song was Perfect Strangers by Deep Purple. But then they played Spin Doctors in first place. So there was something going on there, right? But it was really never explicit. What I understand is that the payola happened in various ways. It's not just about greasing the radio director's palm. It's not that. But for example, when you heard a promotion, we're going to take 5 listeners to see Oasis in London, all expenses paid. There's something there, but that's even more elaborate. It wasn't meant to push Oasis in the lineup. It was suddenly to boost some national or foreign band that wasn't doing very well. So it's a trade of favors, like suddenly a bunch of computers showed up at the radio station. So that's even dangerous to talk about, right? Because later I have to prove it. It's something that's very far away. It happened a long time ago. But we know that this practice...
And you weren't talking about which radio station that was, right?
Exactly. I worked at 3, right. None, or at all of them. Now, it was It's funny, this thing about paying, right? It's very controversial. It's wrong because the radio is a public concession. No one owns the radio frequency. There were deputies back then. It was all family among those people who distributed the radio frequencies. So you don't own that. You are, in fact, providing a service to society. So you can't use this public space to make money like that. Now, Tutinha from Jovenpan, he has an argument that is in one of the interviews he gave to the magazine Tripe in the 2000s.
It's notorious and open?
Yeah, it's notorious and open. Do you know what Tutinha says? I don't agree, but he speaks. I issue a note. So he issues a statement. He says, because the guy wants to advertise his product here on my radio, which in this case is the music from the record label, and he's not going to pay me. Look how interesting this video of him is. And he says that he issues and notes it as if it were a 30-second commercial from Tamo, right? Not that many times to play Charlie Brown Jr. It's tough, right, man?
Dude, but I know that this is also the case. Dude, back then, my band, I had a band that we would put on the radio, television, and in the small town where we had a lot of access, the jabba was a kit. The people, they make a kit for the radio. So we would make a kit with a CD, with a bag.
To give a little treat?
To give something or so. In a way, it's a more low-key jabba. Low level.
More offensive.
But it was never like that, never, right. Many times it was without any exchange. But the guys would say, no, it's for us to give a kit here.
Yeah.
But anyway, right.
Dude, it's a corporate matter. It's not our responsibility because we don't have power over that. This happens in other ways nowadays in the digital universe. But it was good to work in those environments to learn how things work. So it was good because it broke several naivetés even from when I was a kid. Never did. They had desires that my friends who weren't in this field had, which I no longer had. Dude, do you want to have a band? Do you want to make some music? It's no use trying to push the music on the radio. I always used to say back in the day it was the 90s. So I gave an example like Blur, which is an English band. You want to make some music, get the vibe going? Do you want to test if your tone is working? Keep your equipment in good shape. If your amp, the cable is working, it doesn't make noise, you guys are well rehearsed. Play in a small place for 30 people for 40 minutes, your original stuff. Because more than 40 minutes, music that nobody knows can sound a bit tedious, a bit boring, just play it there. If the crowd gets moved, it's because there's something for you to take forward. Because it happened that I saw a guy arriving at the radio. It is, look, the guy would buy a night at, not at Credit Card Hall, but at a place like Olympia. Then guy'd show up. I'm here, look. I have 300 tickets for you to promote my band on the radio. You can promote, man, but if you don't have anything to say yet, that's the worst thing you can do. Exposing yourself without your work, that's mature. So I've always taken it very seriously. Yeah, man, I don't know if I'm knowing how to express myself now as the conversation is heating up. But I think, and I still think today, I have an approach to the digital world that I recommend. I think even the guys who work with digital media don't recommend that anymore. Ask for a like. If you ask to give a like, of course, it is to strengthen the channel. There is all this boost. But if you ask someone to like you, you are immediately depriving yourself of that person's spontaneity in liking you. And what if you don't do that even once? So you mean that most people who spontaneously, which is what they call organic, found you and liked you, you have a good ruler to measure there because you didn't ask. And this isn't just in the digital world, it's in life.
Yeah. There are those 3 C's that people talk about, right? 3 C's. No, it's like share and come on, 3 actions that a person has to take.
We know that this will work for the algorithm because it's engaging the post. Now, you know very well that if you ask someone to follow you, that person, just because you ask them to follow you, might not actually keep up with you. She isn't interested in you. It's worse. You're punished. You're a guy with 40,000 followers who has no engagement there because she just pressed the button there. So I'm very hard on myself. Even Christian, who works with me, sometimes for example, I'm going to open up. This is really interesting here. He said, Daniel, that we're coming to play here in Rio today, right? So we're there. We have to sell tickets, right? Have sell tickets. Then he suggested to me in the afternoon, he said, why don't you make a story saying that you're going to Mateus? Then you ask him to repost, and then you mention something about the show, right? So I told him, look, I'm on the street right now. I can't talk about this. I would like to tell you why I don't do it that way. But I'm just going to give a quick briefing here. Well, summarized, I just mentioned that I went on Joe Suarez. I'm giving a hypothetical example. After I went on Joe, because otherwise you are in that anxiety of wanting to promote something that hasn't even happened yet. And what if Van had hit today and I hadn't come here? Let's work with what exists. There's a scientific article, funny enough, I'm going off on a tangent here with a will. I'm following a boy on Instagram named Rafael Grata. I don't know if you've seen this kid. He's a guy, I think he's a physical educator who graduated in medicine. I know who that is. And he ends all his posts with more focus, less anxiety. He's a doctor. Yeah, he walks around in shorts, t-shirt. Yeah, I know who that is. More focus, less anxiety, he said, because it's not advisable to keep telling others your plans. So it ends up happening. It's not about bad luck. You don't have to worry about the evil eye. It's not that. It's a matter when you tell someone about a plan you have, your brain doesn't know that you're just sharing it. He thinks you've already accomplished that, so it gives you a dopamine spike. You have the feeling, oh, I've already told it. Then it lowers the dopamine, and all your effort to actually achieve that, your brain has become dissatisfied, so you won't put in the effort to do that. So I see a lot of this asking for likes. You don't need to ask. If your job isn't that great yet, I tell myself, but I'll go one day and improvise. You're a language guy, a jazz guy. There's a protocol at jazz shows, which is when the improv ends, people applaud, right? Sometimes it's just protocol, right? Because the audience is taught to do that. The improv is over. But when the improv is amazing, the person's hand moves like this because they're not thinking. It's so much more rewarding.
Yeah. Man, we, as musicians, we deal with these peaks of emotion too, right? What's the level of the applause? We feel that,
Of course you feel it. Spontaneity, right?
or sometimes the crowd doesn't notice, the improv is over, and it just flows into the next one.
Nothing happens. Then it's all good. You know why?
Because you didn't communicated, it didn't land, and that's okay. The next day is your opportunity, right?